Hello and welcome to another program at the Carnegie Historical Museum here in Fairfield. I'm Gene Luedtke, President of the Museum Board, and we have an interesting program today. The museum was recently donated a gift from the Lucille Sype estate of a number of patriotic World War II posters, war bond posters, recruitment posters, and you can see those on display around the room here today. Our program today is going to be presented by Nell Swygart and her husband Jerry, and they'll talk about the various posters, a little bit about Lucille Sype, and I think it should be a very interesting program. The one thing I should add today is if you hear voices upstairs, it's not the ghosts in the museum today. We have a person here today doing research on the General Parsons items that we have in the museum. General Parsons was the son of the founder of Parsons College and rose to the position of head of transportation in the Civil War. And the hometown of the Parsons family was Flora, Illinois, and they're doing research right now trying to add something in their museum for the Parsons family in the hometown of the Parsonses. So if you hear voices upstairs, it's because we have somebody here doing research and going through card files and things like that. So, Nell and Jerry, the program is yours.
Thank you. Just a little bit about Lucille Sype. She was a teacher in the Birmingham High School for 37 years and 5 years in Keosauqua after Birmingham closed. And she happened to be a teacher of Jerry's. And she retired in '68, and she lived at the corner of 3rd and Hempstead in her family home and died in 1993. So she was a family friend of Jerry's family. Well, today we're going to talk about the World War II posters that you see on display. Guns, tanks, and bombs were the principal weapons of World War II, but there were other more subtle forms of warfare as well. Words, posters, and films waged a constant battle for the hearts and minds of the American citizenry, just as surely as military weapons engaged the enemy. Persuading the American public became a wartime industry, almost as important as the manufacturing of bullets and planes. The government launched an aggressive campaign to galvanize public support, and some of the nation's foremost intellectuals, artists, and filmmakers became warriors on the front. This was the primary form of public communication in World War I. That was all they could rely on, but by 1940, we had radio and movies and billboards. So then why did the government and private industry turn to posters to rally the public in World War II? First, people would encounter posters in places that other media couldn't reach: schools, factories, offices, store windows, and other places outside the scope of paid advertising. And second, posters had democratic appeal. They could be made by anyone, and they could be seen by all. Both medium and message spoke of democracy, which made posters ideal for expressing American war aims, why we fight, what we fight for. For example, John C. Atherton's first prize poster for defense bonds was painted on a 48-foot billboard at one of New York's busiest street corners, 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, July 1941. Well, we had the Office of War Information to handle this. And that was to control the content and the imagery of the war messages. Among its wide-ranging responsibilities, WWII sought to review and approve the design and content of government posters. And eventually there were two contending groups within WWII, and they clashed over the design. One saw the posters as war art, favored stylized images and symbolism, while the recruits from the world of advertising wanted posters to be more like ads. When ad men gained the upper hand at WWII, the look of government posters changed decidedly. They felt the most urgent problem on the home front was the careless leaking of sensitive information that could be picked up by spies and saboteurs. And if you look down the row here, you can see some there that the theme is careless talk. We have wondered about that, what they were thinking of. And I've wondered, because we certainly didn't know anything to talk about for spies and saboteurs, but possibly maybe the people who worked in airplane factories and bomb factories and that maybe had to be quiet. I don't know. Anyway, OWI officials brought a variety of approaches to poster design. Graphics chief Francis Brennan, former art director of Fortune magazine, believed that posters should be war art, combining the sophisticated style of contemporary art with the promotion of war aims. Now, the average American on the home front suffered relatively small material shortages during the war. This situation created official concern that after the initial shock of Pearl Harbor began to wear off, Americans would become complacent about their responsibility to the war effort. As a result, government propagandists took pains to remind civilian America of the suffering and sacrifices that were being made by its armed forces overseas. Many posters thus delivered a strong dose of guilt that encouraged Americans at home to accept the small material deprivations of wartime. I don't like that word propaganda particularly. I think these helped us, persuaded us to support our boys in the service and to be patriotic. Don't you? I think this was a person's opinion that these were propaganda. Anyway, the one down here that says wanted, and you can see the woman, her careless talk cost lives. It makes her an unwitting murderess because she talked. Well, there was at least one complaint to the OWI about this. They said, American women who are knitting, rolling bandages, working long hours at war jobs, and then carrying on with women's work at home, in short, taking over the countless drab duties to which no salary and no glory are attached, resent these unwarranted and presumptuous accusations which have no basis in fact, but from the time-worn gags of newspaper funny men. Well, it was a woman's war too, and you will see the nurse here and the, I believe, what is she, the WAC down there. They wanted to persuade women that this was a good thing to do. These jobs will have to be glorified as a patriotic war service if American women are to be persuaded to take them and to stick to them. Their importance to a nation engaged in total war must be convincingly presented, and that came out of the Office of War Information. In the face of acute wartime labor shortages, women were needed in the defense industries, the civilian service, and even the armed forces. Despite the continuing 20th century trend of women entering the workforce, publicity campaigns were aimed at those women who had never before held jobs. Poster and film images glorified and glamorized the roles of working women and suggested that a woman's femininity need not be sacrificed. Whether fulfilling their duty in the home, factory, office, or military, women were portrayed as attractive, confident, and resolved to do their part to win the war. Well, man the guns. Masculine strength was a common visual theme in patriotic posters. Pictures of powerful men and mighty machines illustrated America's ability to channel its formidable strength into the war effort. American muscle was presented in a proud display of national confidence. And the lyrics by Johnny Mercer, you'll all remember this probably. You gotta accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In-Between. Now, there were a lot of themes of these posters. Careless talk, general patriotism. Do we have the Sullivans up here? That's one that's general patriotism, and this one here, general patriotism, conservation and rationing and recruitment and food and victory gardens, just a lot of different ones, and the selling of war bonds. And now Jerry's going to tell you how they handled that. Miss Sype handled that in school with the students.
I don't know if any of you remember war stamps or not, bonds, how the bonds were purchased. In 41, after Pearl Harbor, it must have been around 42 to 43 when they had the stamps and bonds actually started, like in 42. I was 12 years old at that time.
Yeah, there's one right here. That's 42.
So, as she said earlier, bonds and everything is promoted every place they can promote bonds because they need the money to support the war. And so the school children has to do their part also. And so Miss Sype, every Wednesday at 1 o'clock or during the noon hour, she'd come down from upstairs. She taught high school upstairs and then grade schools downstairs. I remember her having this little table. She'd come down and set this table up in the hallway there in Birmingham. And behind her desk was one of these posters. And I can remember, I can still see those posters behind her desk sitting there selling. I don't think she sold too many bonds, but she sold a lot of stamps. And of course, that was back when there was not much money. And I know every kid wasn't able to buy a stamp each week. And I don't remember if we got a book full or not. My sister and I remember buying them, but I don't remember if we ever got a book full of stamps to turn in for a bond. It just seems something that I don't remember a lot of. If we did get a bond, I don't know where it's at. I don't know what happened. I suppose we maybe sold it back to them, so
Well,
we could do that.
when your book was full, that was an
Yeah, I remember.
1875 bond,
So
wasn't
I've
it?
got a couple of stamps here. If you want to take a look at them, maybe you remember what it's like. And I've had these ever since then. And look,
Weren't they 10 cents?
these are 10, yes. There's 10
Uh-huh.
cent stamps and 25-cent stamps. And,
Yeah.
but every week, not one day, she would have. Now, of course, during the school years, while they had scrap drives in the high school and so forth, participated in that, each grade had a contest who would get the most scrap. My father at that time was in the scrap business, and he hauled it all and sold it for scrap for the war. And
I think we
she's
might.
done a great job of that, and I think, did she get us something from the state for selling?
Oh, maybe a recognition,
Yeah, recognition.
or a certificate or something. I might even have a picture of that. Junk makes fighting weapons, and that, I don't know, that there's a pile of tires, but that's not, yeah.
That
Mhm.
whole main street of Birmingham was all piled up with junk, I remember one time that getting ready to haul it out.
Is that it?
That's all I have on the bond, how she done it anyway during the school. And then I
Okay.
believe the teachers all had a bond taken, they bought a bond a month themselves. I believe each teacher last time.
Well, our last little talk here, we want to, and you want to get your pointer out and ready? We want to talk about these 4 freedoms. I think you've probably all seen this. And Norman Rockwell wanted to do something for the war effort, and he was too old to go in the military. And Franklin Roosevelt had made a speech about the 4 freedoms on January 6, 1941. He addressed Congress and delivered this historic 4 freedoms speech. And at that time, Western Europe lay under Nazi domination. Roosevelt presented a vision in which the American ideals of individual liberties were extended throughout the world. Alerting Congress and the nation to the necessity of war, Roosevelt articulated the ideological aims of the conflict. Eloquently, he appealed to Americans' most profound beliefs about freedom. And so this really inspired Rockwell. And he then gave this to the government, but they rejected it. So the Saturday Evening Post, which was a very popular magazine then, promoted it and put it out. And then the government took over, and it was used as a massive U.S. war bond drive and put into service to help the war effort. Oh, the first one now, you see the young man, the young worker in the town meeting, and he's up expressing something that's very important to him, and you see all the folks around him respecting what he has to say. And it says it makes the artist makes the young speaker an heroic figure, his battered work jacket worn as a badge of honor. And the town folk who surround him listen to him with respect. The composition is strong and simple, with the young man's head silhouetted against what appears to be a blackboard. It may be that this meeting is taking place in the very schoolroom where he learned the principles that have now brought him to his feet. They also reproduced this and dropped copies of this on the European war front, many copies. The next one is the freedom of worship. And that says this is difficult to judge by normal standards because this really belongs as much to the realm of patriotism as to the world of art. And it shows the hands and profiles in prayer. This color scheme is monochromatic, and there's very little depth of image, so that the composition reads almost like a photograph of a sculpted relief. And then he adds each according to the dictates of his own conscience. And the next one, here's the grandma placing that most American of bird on the table, the turkey, and the grandpa waiting to carve, and all the family gathered around. It almost appears like a Thanksgiving dinner. And it says it must have been most effective because at this time we were having rationing. And the last one, freedom from fear. The most effective and effective of Rockwell's 4 freedoms. A husband and wife are shown watching their sleeping children. It is the most ordinary of scenes, and it is this fact that makes the painting so convincing. Rockwell seems to be saying here that our freedom is most valuable when we take it for granted. In this painting, Rockwell captures one of those everyday domestic moments that he handles so well and makes it the medium through which he transmits a universal message. In Roosevelt's speech, it said, "We look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way, everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, everywhere in the world. And the fourth is freedom from fear, everywhere in the world." Any questions? Any comments? And would you like to come up and look at the posters?
Do you think these are posters that she saved through her promotional activity there?
Yes.
So she
She
would
saved,
have received those and then just saved them.
She wrote to 150 service people, and they wrote to her. And we acquired all the letters coming and going. And I was over a year taking these letters and getting them back to the family members. And they went from coast to coast. And some of the family members, of course, passed away, so they went to sons and daughters, local people here in town, and then I would say every place. And I have her diary at home on this letter writer. She had a complete diary of how many she received every day, who from, and what she sent out to everybody, what letter, what day. She was a busy person. And then she also taught school. And
then she sent a newsletter.
then she also sent a newsletter. The churches of Birmingham started first. And as it progressed along, why they kind of more or less turned it over to her. I think she run the copy for them up at the duplicating machine at school. Well, then pretty soon, why, it kind of evaporated away from there, and she took it over. Then she put inserts of letters that the military sent to her, the ones in service. And I have complete copies of all of them at home. And it's, there's a lot of chain letters in where one person would send one letter to another serviceman, and he would add something to it and send it to the next. And that's how a lot of local people kept in contact with their friends and so forth. But it was interesting. I have 4 letters at home yet, and I'm unable to find the family. He was from Birmingham originally, but nobody now. There's no way to. I researched. And one interesting thing on researching one party was there was a Helen Authur that was also a teacher. She was an English teacher in high school, and she stayed with Miss Sype for I think a year or 2 at Birmingham. And when the war came, why she joined the Red Cross, and she traveled troop trains back and forth across the United States. And so I lost her. I mean, I had several letters from her and I lost it. So one letter in the corner was in return address, Mason City, Iowa. So I called the library of Mason City, wanted to know if there was any authors there. And someone gave me a name, but it was spelled different. I called this person and no, that's not us. And so I called back and this lady said that she could, there's a fellow working at the library and he would take care of it. And if she's on anywhere in the United States, he'll find her. So about 3 months, I suppose, later, I had a call from her, and she was located in Massachusetts. And she traveled back and forth across the United States over 300 times on troop trains. And then toward the end of the war, she accompanied the wounded that came in from Europe across the United States. At that time, then they was getting wounded from the Pacific Theater, and then she'd bring that back across the United States. So I talked to her on the phone several times, and as time flies, she's up in her 80s now, and she's hoping to come back to Birmingham sometime for a reunion, but she'll be here someday perhaps.
She married a doctor, didn't she?
Yeah, she married a doctor, and
but your brother had asked her to marry him, hadn't he?
well, that's another story.
Yeah, okay.
I had a brother that was in high school, and I guess he thought she must have been great or whatever. So when he graduated, well, he asked her if she would marry him or something. I guess he proposed to her. So through the conversation, I had always heard that, and my brother was 4 years older than I was.
And he didn't come home from the war.
No, so I asked her about that on the phone because I wanted to know for sure if that was so. Because the whole town of Birmingham knew it, and I'm sure everybody else did. And it was very unusual for a high school student to ask his teacher to do it. But anyway, she said that was true. And when he was in Italy, he got this, she said, a beautiful bracelet and sent to her. And she still has it, and gave it to her granddaughter on her wedding day. A little tidbit of the story there.
I think that's all we have.
That's all we have.
Would you talk about these a little bit with the star symbolism?
Oh, okay. Well, this was what they put out during the Gulf War. But you know, during the war, anyone that had someone in the... Oh, I forgot. Hi, Richard. This one here, yeah. This means, you know, that the fellow, the sailor, has been killed in the war because the Gold Star. And I think in Fairfield there used to be a Gold Star Mothers organization, maybe, once upon a time. Okay. So that's what it means, I guess. Anything else?
The middle.
And this one, let's see, what does he have here? Jerry, you know about that better than I do. Uh-huh. I don't know, does that mean?
That's what like the Christian law there.
Is it?
Look like it, yes.
Okay. Okay, anything else? I think that's it.
I think the one thing that's interesting,
Now you're welcome to look at
my
these.
background in advertising is to see how many of these posters do take on kind of the advertising field that Nell talked about. And each of them has a tremendous amount of symbolism, all the little features, all the little details that are in them. We're going to leave these up for a month. Our program in November is going to be with the National Guard Band, the 34th Army Band. And I think I'd like to see these left up for another month, and so they'll be here for next week. Anybody that's watching on FPAC is welcome to come to our meeting. That'll be the second Sunday in November, which is November 11th.
Oh, hey,
Kind of
that'll be
unusual.
appropriate.
But we would invite everybody to come up next month for that program. And for those that are you who are here today, feel free to stay around and look at all the different posters because they really are nice, and it's a tremendous contribution to the museum. We are going to be permanently displaying some of these and trying to create a system where we can have a lot of these available for people to look at. So for those that are here, thanks for coming today, and for FPAC, thank you for filming today, and hope you enjoy the program.